Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Political. Today, we're going to be talking about the hot topic of the time. It's the Woodward books and the tapes that accompany it. My name's Connor Allen, and I'm here with Ian Smith.
Hello, everyone.
And before we get into this episode, as usual, please do, if you do want to support us, if you do want to help us get our message out to people, if you do want to help us build this platform to help people talk about politics, nerdy politics stuff that we love, please do hit the subscribe button down below and possibly a like button, and do consider leaving a comment. And with that out of the way, we're going to go straight into a video. This is a video of what Trump actually said to Mr. Woodward,
Bob.
old Bob, and we're going to play that right now.
Goes through air, Bob. That's always tougher than the touch. You know, the touch, you don't have to touch things, right? But the air, you just breathe the air, and that's how it's passed. And so that's a very tricky one. That's a very delicate one. It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus. This is more deadly. This is 5 per. This is 5% versus 1% and less than 1%. So this is deadly stuff. Well, I think, Bob, really, to be honest with you,
sure, I want you to.
I wanted to always play it down. I still like playing it down.
Yes,
because I don't want to create a panic.
And this really is, more than anything else in the Trump presidency, this marks him out as a leader. Just cast your mind back to February, back to March. The COVID pandemic was just getting going, at least in the West. Obviously, the Chinese had suppressed it for a few months before that. Do you remember, Ian, the fights over toilet paper, the changing recommendations every day, the WHO being utterly useless? The guidelines seem to shift and change every day. Do you think that president coming out and openly admitting, this is much more deadlier than we thought, guys, this is much scarier than we thought, do you think that's going to be helpful? Or
no, of course it's not going to be helpful. And I mean, I can speak about my own experience with the pandemic in the UK. We had basically Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, going and shaking hands with COVID patients and saying like, just wash your hands and that's all you really need to do. And we had the scientific advisor at the time, these are like at the forefront of diseases and pandemics and this contagious diseases and this kind of thing. And they were basically saying, just all you got to do is wash your hands and that's it. And obviously we're going to beat this thing, and treating it kind of like a flu, kind of like a flu type thing.
We had the plan in the UK, didn't we, to get everybody infected because we thought it would pass. It would be easier.
But these were the initial ideas that were coming out. This is because people were like, I don't really know. Like, we don't really know what we're dealing with here. And
it all comes...
I just want to say as well, despite the fact that they were kind of playing it down, you still had people rushing to get to the supermarkets, just doing all sorts of ludicrous things.
Great battles over the toilet paper.
Great battle over the toilet paper, right? Like toilet paper running out. My mother is like within the at-risk groups because of other medical reasons, and so I recognized this and I was concerned about her, so I said to her, you're staying at home and we're going to go and get you a shopping for you. And we had to travel like I don't know, like good 30 miles or something like that to find a supermarket that actually had some level of stock in terms of basic necessities and just basic shopping. Everywhere was like toilet papers ran out, things like like rice or pasta, like long life stuff, impossible to get hold of. And this is with the government still kind of downplaying it a little bit and being like, well, the virus, it's not that big of a deal. People were still panicking.
What we saw there, that's only the people who are most prone to panic buying going out and panic buying. Okay, most normal people stayed at home. They kind of laughed at them, actually. So if you have a world leader coming out with this, hugely, it would be very, very unhelpful at the time for him to come out. And you know what? The Democrats would have attacked him for it too. It all comes back to the maxim. The great poet Lord Byron, he said, if you can keep your head while others around you are losing theirs, then you'll be a man, my son. And what Trump's done there is kept his head. I never thought I'd quote a poet on the politics podcast, but there we go. And there's plenty of scenarios throughout history of this. If you go back to 1983, there was almost there were war games with NATO and the Soviet Union, and there was almost a global nuclear a global nuclear war. Do you think the president came out the next day and informed people of this? No, because there was huge panic in the streets. Sometimes you have to regulate what information you're putting out there for their own public good.
It's quite common, especially during the Cold War as well. That we hear about now, after the fact, all of the times where Russia and America almost did go to full nuclear war with each other. All of the crises that happened, all of the mistakes, human error, radars that weren't functioning properly, all of these scenarios where it almost happened. You don't hear about them. You didn't hear about them at the time. No, we heard about them long afterwards. And this is basically the same thing. At the time, this is February. Little is known about the virus. He was actually wrong as well about what he said there. He said that basically the mortality rate was 5%, which obviously isn't correct. I think it was coming out around the time at about 5% of people who were tested positive were dying. But obviously it wasn't counting all of the people that had it that weren't being tested because they weren't showing any symptoms. And also, this is at a time when hospitals were just, in Italy, obviously in particular, and obviously we saw in China earlier before then, when the hospitals were just completely overrun. And, people see, like I remember seeing those videos and stuff in places like Italy, and you had like these hospitals, you just had people like lined, hospital beds, one after the other, right? And, people will criticise the Prime Minister here, Boris Johnson, and, the government, of course, in hindsight, should be criticised, and they should say, well, he could have done this and he could have done that. And I agree, of course, they could have done things better. But at the time, people were going on about what was going on in Italy, and we saw these videos coming out when we were like, whoa, this is a serious thing. So I think it was helpful to some extent to have that kind of calming voice coming from the government to say, listen, this, we're going to get through this and we're going to deal with this. And that, to me, when I think back to a lot of the stuff that Trump was saying at the time, it was like, we're going to deal with this, it'll be gone and all that. And I don't really know if anyone necessarily believed that, but I think it was good for a lot of people to hear from your president saying, we're going to take care of the situation, don't panic, don't worry. And
someone's in charge, someone's taking care of this.
This is an example of leadership. I don't know.
I agree with you there. When we talk about examples of leadership, what do you think about Woodward's role in this? Because if Trump has, so allegedly, he has knowledge of this pandemic. He knows how deadly it is. He shared that knowledge with Woodward. And what has Woodward done? Did he release it into the public sphere immediately to forewarn people? No. He waited until did he even release it in, say, July? No. He sat on it until 3 months before presidential election, timed it to coincide with his book.
In book season, new release season.
And who stands to make a massive profit out of this?
It's almost as if the motive with Woodward here, as it has been with Bolton and Trump's niece And what was the more recent one that we were talking about?
There's hundreds, aren't there? You literally cannot
Can't
name
count them all.
every single time someone has done something like this to make a profit.
There's been it's almost as been it's orchestrated that these books are released sort of 2 weeks apart to give this consistent attacking, and it's always just the same.
Trump doesn't want to fly in a helicopter. Trump knew about the pandemic. Oh, and by the way, buy my book because all of the allegations are in there. Come on. You know what? The American people aren't stupid. You know, they get a bad reputation sometimes, but these people genuinely believe that Americans are so stupid that they'll just gobble anything up. But they're not. And they see through the lies of people like this. They see through the spin of it all. And that's why you always see pollsters and the establishment being shocked nowadays because people have just had enough of it.
Sure, and this is a reason I believe if you look outside of the left wing circles, the echo chambers and the hysteria, and you've got CNN playing this up like, oh, it's this and that, and obviously you have the Democrats going along with it, and then you'll have the more vocal left wing supporters going along with it. Actually, the swing voters, the people that are on the fence about Trump Biden, I think they see through things like this. And I think they're going to see through all of these consistent, sustained attacks with no real validity to them whatsoever. I mean, anonymous sources or he said, she said kind of situations. And now you have them trying to twist and spin and manufacture this story from an interview that Trump openly gave to a journalist who has written books about previous presidents. Like, he thought, did he seriously think, oh, these words that I'm saying here aren't on the record? No, of course he knew that this was going to be published. Like, of course he knew that. So he wouldn't say it unless he thought it was going to be published. So he was saying it to say, listen, this is what I do. I know you're not going to publish this book until the future. But yeah, of course, as a leader, that's what I'm expected to do. I don't want to create panic. I don't want to say to people, oh, this is what's happening. There's loads of people dying and all this and all that, and represent the virus as the worst possibility that it could be, because we were still learning so much about it. And there was a range, right? There was people saying, nah, it's completely harmless. And there was other people saying, no, there's a really high mortality rate. This is a very dangerous virus. This is, as a leader, as the president, he's come out and he's portraying this image to the public that it's not even so much, the virus is dangerous. It's more, we've got it under control. We're going to do a good job. We're going to, do what we need to do. And then let's talk about actually what was happening in February, because what was Joe Biden doing and what were Nancy Pelosi doing at that time?
But they were opposing every single thing Trump did. The travel ban with China, it was, a racist conspiracy. Travel ban in general, evidence that president wasn't, fit for office. What do you think about the mask? Because actually, Trump didn't mandate the wearing of a mask or anything, right? What do you think about masks?
Well, he's not mandated wearing a mask, partly because that would be unconstitutional anyway. Obviously, you can't tell people that they have to wear a mask. That's absurd. And I believe, even I think it was Kamala Harris was interviewed on this, and she was asked, well, what would you do then? It was basically a softball question. It was obviously set up, but even when the questions are set up, they still apparently can't give answers that are coherent. So she said, well, yeah, we would have done a mask mandate, but of course no one would be punished for not wearing a mask.
Okay, so there's no mandate.
Yeah, so there's no. It's the left approaching it in the same way, that they approach white guilt, which is basically to kneel in submission and apologize profusely and hope that, if they just ask pretty please will everyone wear a mask, that everyone is just going to do it. It's the same principle.
It's such a misreading of the American people, isn't it? So for our European listeners, we have perhaps a difference of perspective in this. But to an American, I think to most Americans, the very idea of a federal government coming in and mandating you wearing a certain item of clothing is just goes against the very idea of America, doesn't it?
Well, sure. In Europe, we have these, and even in the UK, we have this idea of collective responsibility, I suppose you would call it. In America, it's about individual responsibility. You're responsible for your own actions. You're responsible for yourself. If you think you're at risk of catching the virus and you think, it could be dangerous to you, then you take measures to protect yourself, and that's how it goes, right? But in Europe, there is this idea of, we have to, we've literally shut down businesses. We've mandated businesses to close. We've effectively forced people out of their jobs. We've told people that they have to stay in their homes until a certain time. We have curfews and stuff like that, even now. Which
has been so violently destructive, hasn't it?
Oh, definitely. And
I think I saw figures somewhere out of 1 in 3 people in lockdown had a suicidal thought when they were confined to their house. And
I think this is the nuance that escapes people a lot, is that they will look at, if you just let the virus, run rampant, then that will cause deaths. And it's but what about the human cost by forcing people to stay into lockdown? What about the human cost by creating this? Let's face it, it's a depression, effectively, economically, right? The level that the economy has shrank in some of these countries that were beforehand, had probably great unemployment rate. The UK had a really good unemployment rate. America had, as we know, some of the best unemployment rates on record.
Well, the American economy was booming in January.
Yeah.
And, even if you're a Democrat, even if you're a radical leftist, you can't deny it because the numbers are there.
Exactly.
The American economy is doing great.
They stopped trying to deny it, and then they just started saying, it's Obama.
Oh, yeah.
Or Trump's just taken over Obama's economy, and that's what it is. It's okay. We're gonna believe that, are we? Now that you just suddenly changed your tune, in the same way that we're gonna believe all the other things you suddenly changed your tune over, like the riots or bloody China or whatever, or something like that. So,
what do you think would have happened if say, Hillary Clinton had won the 2016 election, and suddenly it was the Democrats, the far left Democrats, in charge of the pandemic response? Because I think in America, you'll be seeing a much more European style response. You'll be seeing people confined to their houses. You'll be seeing mandated mask wearing. And again, it's a man-made depression.
Maybe in the Democratic states, which obviously have gone along with that anyway, because obviously it's it's the choice of the governors there. Here's the thing, it stresses it really frustrates me, because I kind of started to go along with it. I was like, Trump's he's done a bad job here. He's not done a very good job with the coronavirus. And I really started to think about it, and it's hold on, no, because I'm looking at it through the lens of a European, almost in some way, and that's kind of what the Democrats are doing as well. Is they're trying to create this image through this lens that does not accurately represent American society, and it doesn't. It doesn't do justice to what Trump actually has done. So, America is never going to agree, and people in America are never going to agree to these draconian authoritarian lockdown rules. And then, so this idea of, if you just force people into their homes and stuff, that was never going to happen. It's a different culture. It won't happen there. People won't agree to that kind of thing.
And this is why in Europe, we can't understand the gun issue. We can't understand why people would ever want to have a gun, or why it's acceptable in any way, shape or form. But go to America, and the gun is almost an extension of personal liberty, isn't it? It's almost emblematic of personal liberty and right to defend yourself, not to have the police come 50 minutes after the crime and pick up your corpse, right? But for you to take affirmative action to defend yourself. That's so American, and that's why people love that country.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, agree with it, don't agree with it. It doesn't really matter, to be honest with you. The reality is, it's in the Constitution. You have the right to peacefully assemble. And it's basically the same argument when it comes to gun rights. That's in the Constitution. You can't say to people, you have to force to stay into your home. Obviously, they're trying to do it in some of these democratic states now. And that's basically, it works because the people are already that way aligned anyway in terms of their beliefs and their values. They already believe in collective responsibility. But you're not going to suddenly change people's values and views. They believe in personal responsibility. If you think you're at risk with COVID, it's up to you, right? You know the risks. It's been made clear. This targets people, with like sort of, things like diabetes or whatever. And obviously, if you're older as well, then you're more at risk. You know that if you fall in that category, you need to take the personal responsibility to deal with it, right?
Isolate yourself, wear a mask, do what you got to do.
Yeah, exactly, right? At the same time as well, I just want to add, when it comes to masks, if companies say you can't come in unless you're wearing a mask, I'm all the power to them, right? Because
their property, their rules.
Exactly, it's their property, it's their rules. They're a business; they can do what they want. They can refuse entry to people if they don't follow the rules if they want. That's how it works. If they're concerned about the spread inside their store for their staff members, whatever, and they say you can't come in unless you've got a mask, that's absolutely fine. So these people going into these stores and saying, "Oh, I don't have to wear a mask," or "Oh, the virus is fake," or whatever, it's like, I don't care. I don't care what you think. It doesn't matter. This is the company's right. Like, if they don't want to allow you in, they don't have to. You don't have a right to go in there.
It's actually nothing to do with the virus. It's actually to do with the company's right to admit certain people.
Exactly. And it kind of, in some ways, it reminds me of, do you remember when there was a cake shop who
for the gay people,
refused to bake a cake, refused to create a cake for a gay couple, for a wedding cake for a gay couple. And at the time, I was like, well, I'm not against gay people being married. Why would I be? Like, what business is that of mine, right? But I'm also don't think that you should force people to make cakes because someone's asked them, like, because someone's that you can't turn away business that you don't want to do. If you don't agree with that on a personal level for religious reasons, then that's your right. And this is basically the same principle. I can't agree with things like that. I can't side with the cake owners on that regard, but then not side with companies who refuse people because they're not wearing masks now. It would just be hypocritical. I have my value and principle, and I'll stick to it regardless of,
Absolutely.
whose side I happen to be on that time. So
ultimately, it's not the state's business. It's not the government's business. It's not anybody's business except the business owner, how that business operates, or who it chooses to serve. End of story.
Yeah, exactly. So I think when we're talking about this issue as a whole, and we're talking about coronavirus, you have to take into account the differences. If we're looking at it from a European perspective, you have to take into account the differences in American culture before you're ready to start criticizing the Trump administration. You have to take into account what he could have done, consider the autonomy. So what did he do? Well, he, banned people from China coming in, and then he extended that ban to Europeans as well, which at the time was being called xenophobic by people like Joe Biden. At the time, you had Nancy Pelosi saying, like, go have a party down in Chinatown or whatever. I don't know how that's relevant to anything. It doesn't make, I guess what's she trying to do? Show solidarity for Chinese people? Like, just because people that are infected, with a virus, are being told that you can't come in at this moment in time until we get things under control. That apparently means you're racist against Chinese people. I don't know. So, and then obviously when you look at the states and how they've performed, really you should be just directing all of your anger towards people like Andrew Cuomo in New York who have sent, and this is a similar criticism that you have here in the UK, they've done exactly the same thing. Is that they've sent infected people from care homes who've gone to the hospital. They've sent them back to the care homes to make space in the hospitals, and then they've spread the virus in the care homes. Just an awful decision. And America had, they had the hindsight on this because they'd already seen it happen in Europe. The same mistake had been made. Send all the people back to care homes where the virus spreads, and you basically just have, Sorry,
go on. Finish your point.
Well, you basically just have like a hunting ground for the virus to spread among a demographic of people who it causes issues with most, who it is most effective against. The people most affected by it. And
so there you have it. Andrew Cuomo on the down, Donald Trump on the rise. Yeah, and do you have anything to add, finally?
Well, I think I just want to wrap up and say the reason why people will look at this situation and see Trump positively, or the people that it's important to, and the people that it's important that they see it that way, which is the swing voters, is they will see a president who acted accordingly, really, which is to not create a panic. And they'll see a president who showed leadership, which is something that apparently he's incapable of.
The great paradox of the left. Okay, guys, thank you very much for listening. And again, I was going to repeat what I said at the start of the video. We do want to build a community of political people here. We do want to hear your comments. So please do consider commenting down below if you agree, or even if you disagree with us. And please do hit the subscribe button too. Thank you very much.